In today's economy, more people than ever are looking to buy and sell businesses. But how do you do it? Welcome to the Deal Board, presented by Transworld Business Advisors. Straight talk about real deals and real people. Listen to stories, interviews, and expert advice to help your business sale, merger, or acquisition process. Now, here are your business exit experts, Andy and Jessica.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. And today we have some great guests for you to share with you. We are talking about personal branding, and these days in Twitter and Instagram and Facebook, it couldn't be any easier, perhaps, to jump out there and brand yourself, right, Jessica?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many platforms now, and you see, companies literally just being built around personal brands. But I think personal branding's been around for a long time, and like we were just talking, there's nothing more personal than like psychology practices, and lawyers have big personal brands. So it's kind of tied into that professional services. I think it's just gotten a lot more prolific with social media and all the ways that you can promote your brand online now.
Yeah, and one of the myths is you can't sell a personal brand. And as we were talking beforehand, one of my earlier deals was I sold a psychology practice. I mean, there can't be anything more personal than a psychology practice, and we were able to sell it. Now, businesses like that won't sell for a huge multiple because, it relies on the brand and people are worried, on the personal person that was delivering those services. And people are worried that, in changing hands that they might lose it. But let me tell you something. From experience, even the personal businesses, like the personal professional practices, they transfer pretty well. I mean, people don't like to change where they're going to the dentist or going even to the psychologist or getting their hair cut or going to their lawyer. And it retains its value. So, and we're going to talk about how to create a personal brand. What are the dangers of the personal branding, right? We actually have someone that says, be careful, right?
Yeah, I mean, we've Ray Titus, who's the CEO of United Franchise Group, and he joined us just a few episodes back for our 40th anniversary edition. But he talks about, weighing the benefits of a personal brand, but also not to neglect your business brand and building a brand as a business, which I think is a very important aspect to keep in mind while you're pursuing these types of activities, because you have to have a solid business brand too. And, you have to weigh those equally.
Yeah, and of course, there's dangers in building a personal brand, right? That somebody becomes a bad actor or an adverse member to society. We've certainly seen, cases like that where a brand, and I won't mention any by name by embarrassing them or dragging it through the mud even more, where somebody, gets convicted of a crime or something like that, and it certainly brings down that brand. But, beyond that, if you're an entrepreneur out there and you and you just bought a business and you need to get out there to create your brand, it has never been easier. And there are some great ways to do it. We talk about one of the ways to do it is podcasting. So we talked to Andrew Horowitz of The Disciplined Investor, and he has DH Unplugged, and he's been podcasting, I think before they invented podcasts. I mean, he's been doing it for so long. Was he on episode what?
615, I think now, just for The Disciplined Investor. And he's got 2 podcasts. So
yeah, so he is a podcasting animal, as they say. And he has some great advice if you want to go out there and brand yourself through podcasting. And then, of course, we have the lovable, the famous, the motivational Steve Nudelberg on today talking about personal branding. And he has some really good tips to understand how to go out there and personal brand. And he's a bundle of energy.
Yeah. And I mean, he just spoke at our annual Transworld conference a couple months back. He also has his own podcast, right? Confessions of a Serial Salesman. So you can check him out on there. But both of these guys have really built incredible personal brands and kind of let you behind the curtain in these interviews today.
Yeah, again, another great episode of entrepreneurs out there going out there and building a brand. And again, I'll just put it out there again. Don't be afraid of trying to sell your personal brand. I mean, we've seen $1 billion deals in Martha Stewart, and we've seen other deals where people can, sell a name, Jack LaLanne, and you can think of all the other brands that have been built over the years. The Fred Astaire dance studios pro still going on. I mean, all these brands could eventually be transitioned into businesses.
Right. And there's, like you said, there's value there. And I think one of the core beliefs at Transworld is we believe there's value in every business. So hopefully you get some stuff out of today, figure out how you can build or grow either your personal brand or business brand, and just move your business forward.
Yeah, I'm excited. Let's get to it.
Transworld Business Advisors is the world's largest business brokerage and mergers and acquisitions firm with over 500 brokers in nearly 200 offices worldwide. Transworld's team handles thousands of business sales every year. To be connected with a qualified business broker or learn more about the buying and selling process, visit tworld.com/the deal board or call 888-719-9098.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. And I am very honored to have my partner and the CEO of United Franchise Group that owns many brands. And we did talk to him in another podcast. We were talking specifically this time about personal branding. And we thought it was very interesting what he said. And Ray, welcome back, number one.
Oh, well, it's good to be back, Andy.
And so we picked up on something you said, and we were talking about, and we told you we were doing a show on personal branding, and you said, hey, sometimes people go too far with personal branding to where it could actually be a liability on your company. So why don't we just jump right in and talk a little bit about that? I know you have a balanced approach. You think that personal branding is important, but why don't you talk a little bit about your philosophies?
Well, and thanks, Andy. It's good to be here again. I will tell you openly, I think that, creating a balance between personal branding and building a brand is extremely important. Building a brand is a lot different than a personal brand. Now, a lot of people confuse the two, but a personal brand, it really becomes based on that person. Now,
Right.
If they're really good, Andy, and I know you have some great employees and I have some great employees, but if they built it just about them over the years, and I've been doing this for over 30 years now, I have great employees that have had bad years and their brand was hurt those years. And so if somebody gets sick or they get in an accident or in the hospital, it's really hard to follow up on leads timely and prospects and other people timely for that brand, for that person, if they're not there. So what I have kind of balanced between, I think, yes, the personal branding side to me is more about credibility and it's more about confidence with the customers and their clients. But in the same breath, we should never lose sight of the brand itself. So, and an entrepreneur should not be the brand themselves, because how are they ever going to go on vacation, Andy? I mean, they can't. And so you need to build and build your personal brand on, yes, you're going to be responsive, you're going to have quality and great service and building relationships with your customers and your clientele. At the same time, not losing sight that if it's Transworld, this is about Transworld. If it's Signorama, this is about Signorama. And we're the world's largest sign company, or we're the world's largest business broker and brokerage. And Andy, I think it's so critical that we balance between these two for everyone's sake.
Yeah, I mean, certainly at Transworld, we're certainly concerned about goodwill and enterprise value. So certainly owning the business, we've seen entrepreneurs make this mistake, naming the business after themselves.
Oh, yeah.
That's usually a mistake. Now, you can eventually get around it, like, Colonel Sanders did, or somebody else that named the business after itself, where the brand becomes its own thing, not even the person anymore. But that's usually a mistake, naming the business after yourself.
Yeah, it usually is. McDonald's being the exception to the rule, obviously, but the brothers didn't build that business.
Right.
Ray Kroc did. So he bought the brand, but in that case, the brand had become their name. In some cases, we're talking about salespeople for an entrepreneur that are building their own personal brand. And if you lose that employee, then there's a real problem at that stage. Or if you're building it and you're the entrepreneur and you want to do an exit strategy and sell your business, that becomes really problematic for the person looking to sell the business. So, imagine if this was Andy Cagnetta's business brokerage rather than Transworld, Andy. I mean, it wouldn't, it's a great name you have, but it wouldn't be the same value in that regard, right?
No, in fact, we've loved the name Transworld. I mean, we were Transworld when we weren't Transworld. So now we're across the world, and we've certainly grown into our name. And that's been one of the things that, people have liked about, getting behind the brand, that, it does have that worldly thought. So, when personal branding, I think you do need to be careful that, you don't create a customer concentration issue in the brand itself. Like the brand itself is, perhaps, bigger than, and like you said, if someone gets sick or if they get accused of something or they get into trouble personally, or, we've even seen things like divorces and things like that ruin personal brands.
Yeah, I've seen all of the above and then even more. But in cases where you have clientele, if you have customers asking for a specific person over and over and over again, it's great that they have a relationship, but it is something to really watch as the entrepreneur, and you need to be careful in those circumstances, especially when you were building a brand. So you go back and you go, okay, we want to build personal branding for credibility purposes. We want to build personal branding because you want to build relationships with local people, and it's how we all win in business. And I get it. And I'm not saying don't do that by any means. But in the same breath, just because you're building personal brand does not mean you shouldn't be building a brand. That's not the person. So there is a balance between personal branding and building a brand, which is the valuable entity that can be resold down the road with an exit strategy, that can be expanded or duplicated like we do with franchising here all the time with our businesses. We have close to 1,600 franchisees around the world with our 9 different brands that we use here. And our franchisees are able to have a system and have programs. And there's huge benefits to having the brand too.
Yeah. And I think the one example that you have done here at United Franchise Group, besides even naming it United Franchise Group, listen, you have your own sons involved. So you've been very careful not to make it the Ray Titus show. And so that someday they can take over.
Well, Signorama is a perfect example of that, Andy. I named AJ, who's my oldest son at 27, as you know. I named him 2 years ago. I named him president of Signorama. And so that could go, and the franchise owners could see that, and it was seamless with the group. And because AJ had grown up in the business and he had helped build the brand, he sold the products, he gained respect from franchisees around the world, and it was the right move, and it's proven to be.
Right.
But it's not AJ Sign Company; it's Signorama, the world's largest sign company. So and wherever it goes down the road, and God willing, AJ passes it, and we pass it on to AJ's kids, or Austin or Andrews. I have 2 other sons, and you never know. We want to take the best people to run the brands. But in the same breath, yes, AJ had to work on his personal brand. He had to get his MBA. He had to go out and earn it. He had to go move up the ladder from, a salesperson to a VP to an executive VP to the president of the company. And he had to work his way up that, and by building his brand.
Right.
And when you're in a big company, that's, you have to do that with the politics and everything that's out there. But in the same breath, in the outside world, whether it's LinkedIn or however you're promoting yourself, AJ was able to utilize that and build his brand to get good employees and to recruit and get good customers and recruit. And so there's that balance between having a personal brand like Andy Cagnetta or Ray Titus, and we have our brands and AJ, and the brand itself, and not losing track of the brand itself, and that easy transition when those scenarios happen, that an employee or you get sick or want to go on vacation for a long period of time or anything else. I know we recently had a franchisee that went away to Tahiti, which is awesome, a great vacation and everything else. Well, guess what? We got a lot of other people that could pick up the ball while they're in Tahiti.
Right.
And that's good.
Right.
And so it wasn't just about them. It's about the company and the brand.
I think this is a perfect talk for people to understand the difference between personal branding and having a balance with obviously the company brand. Thank you, Ray, so much for coming in today. I really appreciate it.
Been my pleasure, Andy. Anytime. Have a great day.
Hey, Andy, you know what time I think it is? I think it's time to talk about our deal of the week.
Deal of the week. Sold.
Hey, we're back with Deal of the Week, and we have a very special deal today. We talk a lot about big deals, small deals, what kind of buyers are involved in deals, and this one is a very interesting deal. And I have today two bills, so we'll try to keep them separate, and you could discern between the two of them. But we have Bill Kleinschrodt from Transworld Business Advisors of Mobile, and we have Bill Whiston, also from Transworld Business Advisors of Mobile, and they have a very interesting business that they just transacted on, which I wanted to talk about today. So we'll go with the last initial as well. Bill K., why don't you tell us a little bit about this business?
Sure. Andy, thanks for having us on today. This was a very interesting, fast-moving deal that kind of all things came together and just really, the stars aligned. It was a valve distribution and repair shop that, just kind of set the stage a little bit. Was not doing well. It was not doing well for several years in a row. Big losses, $500,000 losses a year for several years. And
wow.
It was a decision-making point, for the sellers. And, there were a lot of things out of their control that occurred that I think Bill Whiston, he was the lead advisor on the deal, can really get into some of those components. But at the end of the day, we were acted as the advisor for the seller, and we're able to run a kind of mini competitive process that really demonstrated to us that no matter what the seller's financials are, there's value drivers that are just very buyer dependent sometimes. Sometimes there's things out there that we just don't know about until we get into it. And it kind of created this perfect storm for the seller, and it worked out in their favor.
Yeah. So, and we talk about that a lot, and Transworld's really good at that. That's why we have a big network, and that's why we work to find the needles in the haystack. So Bill Whiston, why don't you tell us a little bit about, what you found in the business and perhaps how you kind of picked out things that you thought would be valuable and how you found the strategic.
Sure. Well, when we had the first conversation with this company, these guys really didn't know if they had anything of value to sell. The consideration was to just close the doors and walk away from it. So we understand the segment that they work in is an industrial support facility, and looking at the assets that they had in place, looking at the opportunities in that market, we get a lot of buyer interest in light industrial types of facilities. So we started looking at the fixed assets that they had, what the value was, the human capital. It was a very highly specialized shop that did a good job, had a good reputation in the industry. They just weren't making the numbers work.
Right.
So we did a valuation of the business to try to give them an estimation of what we thought we could get. And when we brought that number to them, they were thrilled, thinking that there was any possibility of a sale at all. So that was the beginning of it. We put the company out there on the market, or created a listing for them, and then began the process with a group of buyers who we have locally that are looking for opportunities. So That was the genesis.
Wow, that's great. And so So finding that buyer, and once you brought the parties together, you were able to, did you have multiple offers, or, did the first buyer kind of come out ahead?
Yeah, in this scenario, it was one of those. Well, once we identified kind of our tier one buyer, there was one that just stood out, and had a great industry reputation. And once we learned a little bit more about them and their need, we found out some key information that just made this. We knew where this was going, but we also had other buyers interested and did have another offer in place. But it was, we knew that it was going into this one buyer. We just couldn't, we couldn't leave it at that, so we had to do it, to represent on the seller's side. We had to make sure that, we were getting them the most possible that we could and keep the deal fair, of course, but the buyer needed to be in this market, and they were given a mandate by their corporate office that either they're going to start bootstrap, so to speak, a facility in our area, or they're going to buy one by the end of 2019.
Wow, and
we actually, Andy, we did create a confidential information memorandum. And we put it out to a buyer group and had about a half dozen buyers who were interested in the company. And so it went from that to, multiple visits, multiple conversations with those. And then, as Bill said, the stars on this aligned perfectly for a buyer who really needed to be in this market. As you said, the needle in the haystack.
Yeah. So that's perfect. So why don't you give me a little bit about what the deal looked like, what the structure was, and how it worked out for the seller?
It was an asset deal. It was a little north of $2 million purchase price on, from at closing, cash deal. The seller actually was able to retain their AR, which was nearly $600,000. We were able to retain some of their surplus inventory that the buyer did not want or could not actually have with some of their distributor rights, and that was approximately another $800,000 and retained unrestricted rights to sell that off. And then really one of the biggest components was the lease, that was a sublease that was negotiated, that that they spent a lot of effort in improving, and were able to get this premier tenant in long term. And all in all, it was about a $4.5 million package for a company that was losing $500,000 a year, and was nearly $2 million in debt. So they came out as a win-win, and from the buyer's perspective, they're hit the ground running immediately.
Yeah. So again, good deals for good people, and getting the right buyer, that's what it's all about. And so if somebody else wanted to contact you to talk about businesses like this, or be able to sell their business, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Best way is to give us a call or look us up online, tworld.com/mobile, or 251-237-1030 is our number. And again, Bill Whiston kind of heads our M&A larger deal types, and we also focus heavily on the Main Street brokering as well.
Great. Well, Bill, did you have one more thing to add, Bill?
I did, Andy. I just wanted to say, because I know that you have sellers and buyers who are listening to the podcast, and we were involved so tightly with every part of the process here, working with the buyer, working with the seller, but also working with the landlord, the accountants, the attorneys, with everyone that was involved on this from both sides to make this happen. I mean, this was one of those where it did align, but it would have never happened without our involvement and being in the middle and serving the role that we did in every capacity. So yeah. I'd leave it at that.
Yeah, no, that's great. We hear that a lot. And I do get, thank you letters from our sellers and our buyers saying often that it never would have happened without the professionals involved. And obviously, Bill, you're a professional, and you're both professionals. And so thank you so much for doing another great deal here at Trans World. So thanks for coming on today.
Thanks, Andy.
Hey, we're back, and we have a very special guest today, Andrew Horowitz, investment advisor to the gods. But, he's a friend, and on top of it, he's been podcasting since 2007, which I didn't even know podcasting existed in 2007. So he is going to talk to us about maybe just how to get started and why to get started in podcasting and, his great story. So, Andrew, welcome. Thank you for being here today.
Andy, thanks. I appreciate it. Yeah, I didn't know about podcasting in 2007 either. What happened was I was writing a book and I had this kind of life dream that I want to write a book. And I thought it was like really cool. And I'd get down all the different things that I learned over the years in investing. So my publisher says, you should really think about a podcast. And I said, well, what's a podcast? And they're like, well, it's this new thing where you could, have an audio and it goes out through this thing called iTunes. And I'm like, oh, okay. So we set it up and it turned out that, as I was writing the book, it was a great promotional device to enhance the distribution of the book. And on top of that, what ended up happening was because I was really early in on this, it really started to, gain some steam and listeners. And all of a sudden it started to be, people were calling me about, how do I do business with you? When we weren't really even promoting necessarily the business. And on top of that, what was really cool and what has been really cool since then is that I am able to get just incredible guests on the show on a regular basis that I would never have the opportunity to speak with, that allows us to get financial education and insights and just really expand my knowledge and my audience knowledge. So the whole thing is a great business tool, and it can be used also as an educational tool as well. So it's been a pretty good journey.
And you were saying you get like 90% of your new business from this?
Yeah, about 90% of my business comes in through the podcast, because what we did was, we seem to have been able to hit a sweet spot in terms of how we do this. So it's an hour per week. I have two different shows, an hour per week. One's called the Disciplined Investor Podcast, and that one is where we take either I spend about an hour talking about topics, or I bring a guest on, talk about markets, talk about a whole host of things. But the point is that it's really educational, and people really dig it. They don't like the promotional stuff. We try to stay away from that. It's an important characteristic, I think, of podcasts, to try to soft shoe the promotion.
Sure.
And then I have another one called DH Unplugged, where myself and John C. Dvorak do it once a week on Tuesday evenings, and we actually live stream that. He's kind of the man on the street. He's a technology guru, well known for years, writer for many magazines, and we go over just a bunch of things. We have games and contests, give away shirts and trophies, have a weekly stock pick that we do on DH Unplugged. So all of that really sets the stage for people to be listening. And as you are in their ear for an hour or 2 hours a week, you become friendly with them. You become someone that they believe they have a two-way conversation with. And that's really important. The whole idea of, putting the audience in there as a component of the actual audio.
Yeah.
So not just talking to someone else, but also in, kind of bar stool talk, where there's three people on the bar stool, is me and you and the audience are sitting there talking. So, getting listener feedback, questions that have come in, listener questions answered, all that has really created kind of a really cool vibe in terms of my social media and everything that we do. And people just call us and write us and want to do business.
Yeah. I mean, you're definitely having fun on that one. And I loved listening. I've listened to a couple already. So you are very interactive with the audience, and we're a new podcast. So we're taking some advice from you, and we're going to put a ask questions button on our website and all that kind of stuff. But okay, let's take one step back, and, we're talking to small business owners, and, it certainly can help their small business. So how do you get started? I mean, it is daunting.
It is daunting because it's, first of all, if it's an area not familiar with, the whole idea of audio, and you got to sit in front of a microphone and who you're talking to. But I got to tell you something. If you just put down an outline or a script and get something down on paper on a topic that you really know a lot about, and then you get yourself some kind of a setup, it could be as simple as, just a decent microphone pumped into a computer that has there's Audacity, that's a free program, and there's Adobe Audition. There's a whole bunch of high-end ones also. But basically, in terms of just a one-off, just no guest talking, just get something and start recording. And then, it becomes easier and easier as you do it. I could go for an hour without notes.
Right.
As you can see.
Yeah, you're a good conversationalist for sure. But you talked about not overhyping it or not, asking for business. You do want them to be informational, and that's what we're striving to do too. So you talk about bringing your A game as well, doing the research, making sure you know what the hell you're talking about.
Yep. So like this weekend, for example. So this weekend I didn't have a guest, and I really wanted to talk about what's going on with markets. So I really thought about it, and I said, what is it over the last several months that's been going on? So I did 5 lessons that I learned over the last 6 months that were moving markets. And I kind of put it out there to talk about, what I learned and how you can learn from this. What are the signals? What are the things to look at? What's happening? Because a lot of people have a lot of emotions when it comes to the markets. And I wanted to get down to the bottom line of what was going on and how to actually put a plan of action together for yourself so you can be profitable. So I created 5 different lessons that I talked about and brought that to the discussion. And, I put some notes down because I wanted to stay on topic. And it worked out really nicely. But you want to make sure that you have some research and you're talking about something that is not only interesting to yourself, but that you think that will be interesting to everybody else. So making sure that you have the excitement in the discussion, making sure you have information that's usable, not just a smattering of words, making sure that the research is clean and clear, and that you become, what happens here, Andy, is that you become a knowledge source. You become an expert. You have the idea that now that you are someone that people are going to go to as an expert in your field. And therefore, when we turn this totally back to the idea of small businesses, it enhances your credibility.
Yeah.
So therefore, enhances the credibility of your business. And that in itself creates better valuations, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think, listen, when we're going out there and we're looking for a new doctor, you're looking to put flooring in your house, we were just talking about that, you just want to ask somebody some advice and not be, have products shoved down your throat. And you just want like some unbiased advice. And that's kind of the best advice there is out there, that people come in and say, hey, listen, if I were you, I would do this. Like talking to your cousin or friend who's in the business. And so you have that vibe. And I think podcasting can do that for you, that you're just talking to people and saying, listen, if I were you, I would do this.
Right. And you become a trusted source. That's the whole point here, right? So now you think about this for a second, going on this whole area of floor installation, and whether it's going to be, tile, whether it's going to be wood, whether it's going to be some kind of laminate or whatever it's going to be, right? If you have somebody in there and they're talking about the topic of, I'm doing this on the fly here. So
yeah, sure.
On the topic of, hey, you're in a wet water state like Florida, like we're in. And, you want to try to make sure that you have a decent foundation. You want to put down wood. I don't know what I'm talking about here, by the way. So I'm just making this up. You want to put down wood. And if you're going to put down wood, you need to have a subsurface that is, make sure that it is clean and clear and there's no water leakage into there, because you're going to get bowing and you're going to get blah, 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 blah. Right. So if somebody could actually talk me through this and then tell me the ups and downs of why I may want wood or not, and be an expert in that area, the person on the other side listening may say, this guy really knows what he's talking about.
Right.
And then comes to you for business. Now, there's obviously the one issue if you're only local and you're only doing business local, and there's somebody listening to you, if you're in Florida, let's say, and somebody's listening to you in California, that may cause some problems, but still there are opportunities that will open themselves up depending what kind of business that you're in.
Sure. And even when you're not the expert, I think the fun thing about podcasting is bringing on other guests that are experts.
Oh, yeah. Yep, absolutely. I've had from Treasury, people from the Treasury on, all the people on CNBC you've ever seen that I think are reasonable, to Mark Faber, who's a very, very famous newsletter writer, Robert Reich, you name it, I've had him on the show. Larry Kudlow back in 2008. Sure. who I argued to hell with about we're going into a definite recession. He was like, no, it's not going to happen. And, I mean, we went to people that are in the industry 2 weeks ago, I had Ross Gerber on, and he's an absolute Tesla bull, the bulliest of Tesla guys you've ever met. And I was like, well, what about all this crap Elon Musk is doing? And we went through this whole thing. So you can, go on both sides and have this great discussion. And if nothing else, learn something yourself. It's a great tool to learn from experts as the host.
Right. And so you do all those things, and like we're saying, we have some great content. We're like 30 episodes in or so, and it's well received by the people who are listening, but there's just not a lot of people listening yet. So how do you leverage that up?
So that's a good question. So there's a lot of different ways to do it on the cheap, we'll call it, okay? Because, you could do this kind of, you could do this in a way that you don't have to hire a major marketing team. You could hire a major marketing team if you want. But
of course,
there are ways, to enhance it through like social media. So for example, I have a pretty decent sized Twitter following. I'm not big on Facebook. I'm not a real LinkedIn kind of guy, but Twitter seems to be a really good foundation for this. There's message boards that you can post things on. One of the other things is get people on your podcast that have really good followings. And what they'll do is say, hey, I was on this podcast this week. You should listen to it. Right. So you'll leverage the whole process of either guests or you as an expert. And the other thing that is, I think, important about social media is, I don't know about you, but when I see social media that's just pushing a product all the time, it's like an ad, right? That's what it is. It's an ad. Versus the same thing we're talking about a podcast is pushing ideas and unbiased advice. Right. Or at least it may be biased advice. It could be biased advice. That's fine also. If that's what it is, I have no objection to that. But, do it to, coordinate with your social media and, make sure that everything is hitting with them. Tell people on the podcast, hey, do me a favor. Tell your friends. Make sure you're listed on Stitcher and iTunes and Google and Spotify and all the ones. The negative is, and maybe even YouTube if you do a video podcast, which talk about daunting is a whole different discussion.
Sure.
But if you leverage social media with this and really keep the line going on a regular basis every single time, you could do this through a WordPress word site. There are plugins to the WordPress website that will actually post to Twitter and post to LinkedIn. Facebook removed that feature, but you could get that probably programmed. But you post automatically when your podcast comes up. So, you have all these different things that are out there. But I think the main thing is to tell people in your industry and then have them come on, have them tell people that you're on, and then it just becomes a big cycle.
Yeah. Well, I think you're underestimating your Twitter followers. I think you got about 11,000 these days. So you're doing pretty good out there.
Trying.
So, and it's Andrew Horowitz at Andrew Horowitz on Twitter. And why don't you give a plug for your podcast again? So
it's the Disciplined Investor Podcast. It's we launch that weekly, usually on Saturdays or Sundays, most of the time Sundays, and then DH Unplugged. And both have websites and both have information. And I pretty much give away, for example, I used to hold back my quarterly commentary that we did for clients, but we now put that out there for people so they can get a real understanding of it. I just find that in the world we live in right now, with a lot of things being free, people like to get information. There's a bit of an information overload out there. But again, if you can come across and separate yourself and show some quality and trust and knowledge and become that expert in your area, I just think people really appreciate that.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I really appreciate you coming on today. And thank you. And thanks for all the great advice of podcasting. I look forward to getting together with you once you get your new equipment. We'll come back on and talk about that at another time. So
that would be great. Andy, keep up the great work.
Thank you, buddy.
Hey, Jessica, you know what time it is?
Money time?
Almost. It's time for listing of the week.
Welcome back. And this week we have Patrick Bombardiere joining us from our Denver office talking about a listing in the co-working industry. So Patrick, tell us a little bit about your listing.
Thanks, Jessica. This listing is based in Denver. It is a co-working and office rental conference room, really kind of a private office rental business. It's very established. It's been in the same location for 20 years and been super consistent with regard to its profitability, and its vacancy levels have been really, really low and consistent, 95% to 100% full for many, many years. The business is a franchise, and the owner is willing to stick around for a period of transition and also potentially consulting after the sale.
Great. So tell us a little bit about the numbers. What's the business listed for? What's the SDE and any other relevant details?
Yeah, so the business is pretty consistent at about 400,000 per year in SDE. It's being listed at 1.6 million, and it is lender pre-qualified. One of the important things to note is that the business is has scheduled currently with architects and working with contractors for a complete facelift and a little bit of a remodel to kind of bring it up to current times and add some more co-working space to it. So that's going to be something that a new owner is going to be able to enjoy, is a brand new, fresh look.
Great. Well, sounds like a great business in a growing and attractive and profitable industry. Patrick, if a buyer wants to learn more, how can they contact you?
Best way is by emailing me, patrickb, as in boy, patrickb at tworlddenver.com.
Great. Thank you and best of luck.
Hey, welcome back. And I'm so excited because we have such a great guest with us. We have Steve Nudelberg, my friend, author, podcaster, business development guy. What else do you do, Steve?
You know what? The world is so great that I could do whatever I want to do.
That's right.
Isn't that awesome?
It is awesome. Steve is going to be our keynote speaker at our expo coming up in May at Fortrans World, our international expo. So we're so happy to have Steve. I've heard him speak before. I read his book, and it's so great to have him on because we just talk about business and we get it, right?
Yeah. Listen, the power of what we're doing right here, podcasting, is really people having relevant dialogue that they get to share at scale. There's, lots of people are going to listen to this, and the value proposition is it's not BS. We're delivering real value. And I know lots of people who live their lives now by the certain podcasts that they do. And you could do it while you're driving and while you're running. And, so it's, for people who are interested in learning, there's so many outlets. And, I've been listening to yours and you've been on mine.
Absolutely.
And it's just fantastic. If you stick to the fact that you have something to share, which you do, and you and I totally enjoy the time we get to spend, even when it's not in front of a microphone. I enjoy those conversations. Now other people get to listen in.
Yeah, it's great. So we were just talking about what we wanted to talk about because we could talk about all kinds of things with Steve. But you were talking about the thing that's really resonating with people is personal branding, right?
Here's where I travel around the country and people understand what a brand is. Transworld is a brand. McDonald's is a brand. When I talk about personal branding, a lot of people get like, what do you mean? And so it's everything that you are, the way you speak, what you wear or don't wear.
Right.
All of those things make up and create an emotion in somebody else. So brands live in somebody else's minds. If I said fast food hamburgers, most people would say McDonald's, not because McDonald's says that. It's just because that's what it lives inside of most people. Same thing with overnight delivery. They might say FedEx. Well, what emotion are you delivering to people before and after you're in front of them? That's what personal branding is. And so people who don't know, then you're allowing somebody else to create that. And so this concentration on people by people by people that they know, like, and trust, you can control who you are, what messaging you're putting out there. And by doing so, and I've certainly done it for myself and I coach lots of people to do it, the decision about what I do for a living comes in the background, not the foreground. I'm not showing up and spitting out everything I do for a living. This is who I am. This is what and it's so different. It's so liberating. It's really fantastic. And so it's great to see more and more people do it. Once you have established your brand, there's so many broadcast channels for you to, tell people about it. Podcasting is one. Certainly social media is one. LinkedIn is the number one marketplace to take your personal brand and share it with other people. And it's not a place to talk about price, product, service. It's who you are, and that people have a hard time answering, what are you? You're much more than Transworld.
Right.
You always have been.
Right.
I like you. I enjoy being around you. You're smart. You're fun to be with. You're a kick-ass guitar player. You're very philanthropic.
Right.
Look at all the adjectives I can talk about you long before I get to, oh, he's the CEO of a really cool real estate, business advisor company. So I think people have a hard time recognizing it, but when they do, it becomes what they sell more than the product and the commodity that they're talking about.
Right. So we like to give some people some practical advice to walk away with, and your book. I mean, mention the name of your book again and where they could get it.
It's Confessions of a Serial Salesman. It's available all over, the internet, my website, which is nudelberg.com. And it's basically 27 rules for leaders and influencers. And I'm a process-driven guy. If you look at great teams and great leaders, they are process-driven. It's not anarchy. And this is my process of how I've achieved, great sales success in my career. I love it.
Right. So if we're going to give people who are just starting out, and we were just talking to your son, who's thinking about changing careers.
Right.
I don't know if I should say that on the air, but
of course you can.
But he's thinking about taking his next step in his life and changing careers. And if he were to land, and he's going to land in a different community than he was in for the last few years, what's the first thing that someone does? Or someone buys a business, right? They buy a business and they're not in the same career they used to be in. So what do they do? What's kind of like the first step?
That's a really good question. And I think most people are programmed to look at advertising as the first thing I'm going to do. I'm going to broadcast that I'm here. And what social media has done is give us broadcast channels that we can use the people we know to inform the people we don't know.
Yeah, I think it's been an incredible opportunity for small entrepreneurs to get. Yeah, I mean, just think about all the people that have been able to launch their business or grow their business basically almost free of charge.
So here's what I love. There is a big amount of work that goes into being successful at anything.
Sure.
I think this society is programmed to, what pill am I going to take? How fast can I charge that? I want it overnight. There's no silver bullet. It is hard work. The tactics have changed. So instead of necessarily just putting a flyer out there, I have many more channels in which I can reach people, like a podcast.
Right.
That is, we're not pitching anything here. We're just talking about things that can affect the small business owner. So the same things that people used to do, they can do in different ways. So, a lot of times I'll stand up in front of an audience of small to medium-sized businesses or salespeople, and I'll say, is it easier or harder to be in sales or in business today? And inevitably, most people say it's harder. And I challenge them that we live in a world of unprecedented access. I can get to anybody in the world, basically, with one click.
Right.
And when you show people how to do that in a relevant way, not in not interrupting them, marketing that is interrupting me doesn't work anymore. I'm very controversial when I talk about cold calling. I don't think cold calling is an effective method of using the phone. Still think the phone is really powerful, but my calls and when I do speak to somebody, I know a lot more about them. And most of the time have been referred in by somebody I already know, which is what all social media does. It creates tribes of people that, you can meet in a different way. And when you perfect that, it becomes incredibly intoxicating. And I just think that there's an intimidation point. There are people who go like, I don't really understand it, especially LinkedIn. I'll ask people, how many, people in the room are on LinkedIn? Just about everybody will raise their hand. Then I go, how many people actually know how to use it? And 3 or 4 people do it. And the idea that the best business development tool is right in front of us and people are not investing their time and energy to learn it and make it work for them is fascinating to me. But the ones who do, they see the results. And the one thing about every single business is it comes down to people.
Yeah, I mean,
It's so
you know, it's so funny. A lot of people approach me, right? I have 10,000 followers on or
Look at
connections
Look at
on
you.
LinkedIn. That's and I've worked at it, and
Yes, you have.
and I want good connections, and so of course when you connect with people, some of them just go for the hard sell right away. Hey, this is what I do. Can I schedule an appointment with you? And I'm like, no, but if they have something relevant to say, and they said, hey, I've worked with a lot of business brokerage companies before. We've been able to get them leads. I think I could give you an insight. Hey, I'm probably going to say yes.
So let me ask you this. If I were to try and connect to you on your passion for music, how would that resonate with you? Probably very high.
Yeah, of course.
And at some point, we would get to the point with, well, what do you actually do for a living? Oh, you do that? Oh, you know what? We should probably have a conversation about that. The process is very different. You can connect with like-minded people about the things that you share in common. And then the fallback of that is, well, I really like you. Now I know you. Is there a way that we could do business together?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we do that all the time. Listen,
Correct.
I'm on a lot of charitable boards, and we work with these people side by side trying to solve the society's ills.
And you probably more than most.
Right. And and you wind up getting to know people, and you're like, wow, that person can perhaps fit me, or I want to do business with that person over the person that I don't even know.
That's exactly right.
And and we do that all the time. And I've certainly got business from doing charitable things. And we're going to talk about that in another episode.
Well, one of the rules in my book, just while you're on it, rule 27 is give to get. I think most salespeople are programmed, business people are go get the business, go get the appointment, go get all that. Well, if you have something to offer somebody ahead of time that's not related to your business, like, hey, I know somebody that wants to potentially buy a business or sell a business, and I give that to you, no matter what I do for a living, you're going to pay attention.
Right.
Because most of your vendors are not doing that.
Right. And when somebody comes to me to sell a business or talk about selling a business, my first, and their first question is, how much does it cost? I'm like, don't even go there.
Right.
Back up. And I try to disarm people right away because I don't need your business. I mean, we're busy, but here's what I'm going to do. Let's sit down. Let's talk about what your goals are in a very genuine way.
Yes.
And then if it works,
seems logical, doesn't it?
If we're going to do business together, it'd be great.
Would you walk into the doctor or be okay if you walked into a doctor's appointment and they said, thanks for coming, Andy, you need penicillin? Of course not. You
Right.
can't make a diagnosis or make a recommendation until you've learned much more about the people, about what they want, what they need. All of those things make logical sense. But in the sales process, people go and circumvent it. I had somebody mention this to me the other day. When it's very much like Tinder for business. You're just connecting, or Match.com for business. You're connecting with people.
Yeah, Match might have been the better.
Right. Yeah. Well, when people, get to you right up front
Right.
and pitch you, that's
Right.
like Tinder. It's like, whoa, back up,
It's
back
like,
up.
whoa, back
Whoa,
up.
whoa,
Like,
didn't you
cup of
miss a couple
coffee
of steps?
first, right?
Did you miss a couple of steps here? So it's, a lot of what I've done and what I write about is very practical ways to build relationships, not to necessarily build sales. If you build enough quality relationships, the sales will come. And so I think that's where people go wrong, is they're looking to transact instead of create relationships. And I think we'd live in a better world if people just manage their relationships better. And then ultimately,
So it's about creating quality relationships. It's about being genuine. It sounds like it's being, listen, I believe in my product. I truly believe that anybody who comes to Trans World has their business in the best place to sell their business. So I could look at people, straight in the eye and believe that, hey, this is the place for you. And I've certainly told people this isn't the place for you. I mean, I've had people, come to me with, ideas that, we just don't do that. We don't raise capital.
Which being able to say no to people is a real gift. I mean, there's
Right.
a lot of power in saying, and I write about it in my book. I give people the 3 best words in sales. Number 1 is nobody likes to go on an appointment or have meetings. I change that language to visits. Hey, Andy, when can I come by and visit? The purpose for my visit
that's great.
is I want to see if we're a fit, because guess what? We might not be a fit, and that's okay. Boom, the big elephant's out of the room. It's okay.
Right.
You know what? I'll make a decision just as much as you make a decision.
Right.
And if you can decide where you are a fit, then I can provide value to you the same way I do to, and I use 3 pieces of social credibility, and I use you all the time. We've done business together.
Sure.
So don't take my word for it. Ask Andy. And they'll go, wow, I know Andy. Oh, okay, cool. So
Right.
by little language changes and understanding that people do see through when you're trying to sell them.
Right, of course.
It's like, come on, man, really?
Well, sometimes you just call yourself out and say, hey, listen,
come on.
I'm here to sell you at some point.
Well, absolutely. That's okay. I said, at what point can you do that, though? I think you need to earn the right to have that conversation, where a lot of people just jump in and so I'm very detail oriented in terms of how I manage relationships and at what point I'm willing to go and speak to them about, hey, maybe there's an opportunity I hear that you have a problem.
Right.
I think we could, at least have a conversation about how to resolve that problem.
So being a small business owner or buying a business, and they buy a business, and now they're gonna want to set out those relationships, and reading the book is a great way to understand the processes of doing that. But I think you said something earlier that kind of struck a chord with me that I talk about all the time. People would say, what made Transworld great, or the biggest company of its kind in the industry, and it's like, it's not one thing.
No.
There's no magic bullet.
No,
it's a lot of work. It's doing a lot of things right.
Did you fail at anything that you tried?
Of course.
Of course, probably a lot.
Yeah.
So, it is all trial and error, and it's looking at things that work and sticking with them and eliminating, one of the things you learn from football, it's a game of adjustments. People go in the locker room at halftime, look at what's happened and say, you know what, this isn't working. Let's try this. And certainly the biggest example of that is when the Patriots won the Super Bowl,
right?
Against, when they played Atlanta. They made serious adjustments that Atlanta didn't. So understanding that the game is not static, it's changing all the time. You as a business person need to look at the clues that are happening around you, either make adjustments or find people who can help you make adjustments. And I think one of the places that I see people go wrong is thinking that just because they bought their own business, they have to be great at all of the things it takes to run that business.
Yeah, no, you definitely got to hire for your weaknesses.
Yes, man, compliment. Hey, I need help. I need a mentor. I need plenty of people willing to send the elevator back down, not necessarily for money either. There's plenty of information that's available. There's so many podcasts that you can plug in.
I think it was 600,000. I think there was that number.
Is that the number?
It was some crazy number.
We're
I just wrote an article about it.
Did you? Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, you know what? I saw that somewhere.
Yeah.
Where did I see that? The my podcast I've done.
LinkedIn probably.
Right. You know what? It might have been LinkedIn. There was 50. I've done 57 shows. My commitment is that I will have other entrepreneurs like you. Your episode was great. Who will come on and share their story and say, listen, there's no straight roadmap to any of this stuff. And sometimes some of the things you learn point you in a completely other direction than you would have ever imagined. And I think when you listen to successful people, they have all overcome something, and that becomes part of their brand. How did you overcome it? What did you use? And that's the part I love, is listening and understanding that, everybody has a different roadmap. There's not, there's no simple way to do it.
Sure. And, and I've definitely, the other thing I see sometimes is people trying too hard, right? So they're trying to network, or they're trying, and I actually pulled someone aside on a charitable board once, and I said, you don't need to promote yourself here.
Yeah.
You don't.
It's bad when you do.
We'll all figure out. Don't worry. Everybody will figure out what you do. And if they see you do good, and they work beside you, and, we all roll up our sleeves and get things done, people will come to you. Don't overwork it.
Part of being great at anything is to be patient.
Sure.
And let it marinate. People who are considered experts, there's 10,000 plus hours worth of practice. I mean, you didn't just pick up the guitar and be great like you are.
Right.
You practice all the time.
No.
And so whatever it is you do in life, and it's interesting, one of my social media posts today on LinkedIn is that, you have to be okay sucking at something until you don't. Everybody, nobody just, I became a great baseball player. Alex Rodriguez wasn't great the minute he started, but he had a gift. He, worked on that gift, and, that's how you become great. And when you study and read and look at people who have done great things, they learn a lot and they take time to get better at it. So,
right.
That's the thing with social media. Everybody wants to jump in and go, well, I only got 2 likes, who cares? Do it because it's a process to get to more people liking, commenting, sharing. And by the way, if you don't do it for other people, why would they do it for you?
Right.
And so if I could give the audience any recommendation, is to get engaged in social media, doing it first, giving it before you even do anything. Just find the people you like and comment on their stuff and link, like it, comment it, and engage with it, because that's what you want to happen to you. And the minute you do, that's where it gets viral. But it's a two-way street where most people think, I just got to keep posting and taking pictures. No, it's you have to give it before you get it.
Right.
For 27. So
all right.
Here's the thing I tell people. For sure, social media works. Sometimes the people don't work.
It's great advice. So if there's one thing as we wrap this up, if you have one parting gift for everybody, what would the idea be?
Networking is only one letter away from not working. And what I mean is most people look at networking as an event, and it is not an event. It's a lifestyle. I have some of the greatest relationships I have are because I was waiting at valet and I started a conversation with somebody that turned out to be a great friend, a great relationship, a great piece of business. I don't mind when I'm stuck in the airport. It's a captured audience that, I'm constantly engaging. One of the things I think it takes to be really good in business is to be insatiably curious. I just want to know, not to sell, but I just want to know.
Right.
And that comes back at you. So
it does.
Understanding that every single person that's around you is 1 degree away from somebody who could be your biggest deal. Get to work.
Awesome. Steve Nudelberg, thanks so much for coming on today. I really appreciate your friendship, and I appreciate your partnership. It's been a great ride.
I will see you when we speak in Orlando.
Thanks, buddy.
Thanks.
Thanks for tuning into our show today. If you like the podcast, don't forget to subscribe through your favorite podcasting app and leave us a review. If you have questions or suggestions for the show, visit us at tworld/thedealboard or email us at thedealboard@tworld.com.